A mother, Mrs. Jones, and her daughter, Mrs. Fatin, disagreed over an agreement in the case of Jones and Fatin. In exchange for her daughter moving to England to pursue her bar exam studies, Mrs. Jones had promised her a house and her monthly income. Mrs. Jones demanded the return of the house after their relationship fell apart. The court decided in Mrs. Jones' favor, finding no contract because family arrangements are generally regarded as non-binding agreements.
The court is in the favor of the defendant.
So, based on the acting of the case, Jones and Fatin, we can conclude that the concept of consideration need not benefit the promisor is relevant here because the daughter studying for the bar might not directly benefit to the mother in a tangible way, while the mother's promise to provide maintenance and later a house might be seen as benefit to the daughter. The daughter studying for the bar could be considered as a form of consideration. So this case illustrates that consideration doesn't always have to result in direct benefit to the promisor, rather it can take various forms, and the court need to assess the overall fairness and intent of the contractual arrangement.
There is another case that is related to the consideration rule that we have covered, which is hammer and sinew. In this case, if the plaintiff can hold himself from consuming drugs and alcohol, his uncle, the defendant, promised to reward him with $5,000. However, the defendant refused to grant the reward because he said that the plaintiff did not provide legitimate consideration in this promise. But the court stated that a consideration may consist of goods, benefits, profits that gained by a party, or loss, detriment, and forbearance that suffered by the other party. So the court held favor to the plaintiff because he had sacrificed his entertainment to fulfill all the requirements stated by the promisor. Here we can see that a defendant did not gain any benefits in the promise made.
Hi, I'm sure you all have watched the video on the Jones and Fatin case 1969, but today we are going to discuss further about the concept of our topic today, which is first, consideration may not benefit the promisor.
Consideration need not benefit the promisor refers to a legal concept within the context of contracts. Consideration is a fundamental element of a valid contract and it refers to something of value exchanged between parties to a contract. Generally, it involves a promise, an act, a forbearance which is refraining from doing something, or the transfer of some right. In traditional contract law, there was a requirement that consideration must move from the promisee to the promisor. In other words, both parties had to receive something of value in the exchange for the contract to be legally enforceable. However, this requirement has evolved over time and modern contract law has relaxed the strict necessity for direct benefit to the promisor. The principle that consideration need not benefit the promisor means that as long as there is some form of legal detriment or obligation on the part of the promisee, the consideration is valid, even if the promisor does not receive a direct benefit. For example, A promises to pay B £500 if B quits smoking. In this case, B's act of quitting smoking is a legal detriment and it serves as valid consideration for the contract, even though A may not directly benefit from B's action. This principle allows for more flexibility in recognizing and enforcing contracts as it acknowledges that the legal system values the idea of a bargain for exchange rather than insisting on direct benefits to both parties. However, it is important to note that consideration still needs to be legally sufficient and the courts will not enforce contracts that lack valid consideration or involve illegal or unconscionable terms.
Let's continue for the further elaboration of consideration may not give benefits to the promisor. A consideration can be presumed as any action that have legal value that is taken by someone, whether it is an action to do something or refrain from doing something. Here we can understand that a promise to do something in the future or or in the period stated by the promisor can be a valuable consideration. However, sometimes a consideration may give benefits to the third party, which indirectly give benefits to the promisor. For example, a mother promised to pay her daughter fees to the driving teachers so that she is permissible to drive later. In this situation, the daughter is the third party, which indirectly gives the benefits to the mother.
Now, moving on to the commentary part, which is gratuitous promise.
The concept of gratuitous promise is that it is a promise that is made without any expectation of receiving anything in return. For example, a father promised to give his son a Ferrari without expecting the son to give anything in return. Now, what is the correlation between this and our topic for today? It might seem that our considerations concept for today is the same with gratuitous promise because both concepts recognize scenarios where a promise may be valid without a direct benefit to the promisor. Not only that, in a gratuitous promise, there is no expectation of receiving something in return. Yet, the promise may still be legally binding in certain circumstances. While in the consideration principle, the emphasis is on the presence of some legal detriment or obligation on the part of the promisee, even if the benefit to the promisor is indirect or not immediately apparent, but actually, both of these principles are not the same. This is because gratuitous promise cases are often not enforceable as a contract in the court of law. Gratuitous promises are explicitly made without any expectation of return, while the consideration principle allows for a broader range of exchanges where the promisor may benefit indirectly. In the same way, the consideration principle is a more general rule applicable to various contracts, while a gratuitous promise is a specific type of promise with a clear lack of reciprocal obligation.
So, we move on to the next commentary on the consideration need not necessarily benefit the promisor in social and also domestic agreement. First and foremost, a court will utilize the consideration as an absolute principle or tools to determine what kind of consideration is needed in order to create enforceable contract without necessarily requiring the consideration to benefit the promisor. Furthermore, these considerations are commonly used in social and also domestic agreement as it is formed by people with close relations such as family members, relatives, and also spouses. Of course, the intention to create the legal relation is to give privileges to their beloved one. And in addition, the primary goals of the consideration is to ensure that the promisee will be benefited even though the promiser doesn't get one of it. And sometimes this consideration is also can be used as motivation in order for the promisee to achieve their goals, their dreams, and also their ambitions. So in general, domestic and also social agreement that apply this kind of consideration are not binding, but it can be rebuttable if there is a clear proof of the intent to create a legally enforceable contract. As a result, the consideration interaction that may not always benefit the promiser and how they facilitate the court to determine either the agreement is valid or not.
So, we can conclude that the principle of consideration need not benefit the promisor is indeed a recognized aspect of the rules of consideration. In contract law, consideration refers to what each party gives and does in exchange for promise from the other party. While it is common for consideration to involve a benefit for both parties, it is not strictly required that the promisor directly benefit. The idea of consideration need not benefit the promisor allows flexibility in how parties exchange promises in a contract. Rather than strictly requiring a benefit for the promisor, the focus is on ensuring fairness in the overall exchange between parties. Thus, it is not only about getting something right away, but making sure the deal is fair for everyone. Last but not least, we achieve our objective, which is identifying the concept of the rules of consideration. Also, we can study two decided case and commentary on the relevance of the rules of consideration need not benefit the promisor. That's all from us. Thank you.